Hey, what's going on, everybody? I just want to run through a quick how-to. I'm going to try to go step by step on replacing the rear brakes on a Kia Optima. This is a 2012, so this is going to fall in with the 2010 to 2015 third generation Optima. Now, there's a little bit of information out about how to do these rear brakes. It's kind of mixed about approaching getting the rear caliper bracket off due to the rear arm here blocking the bolt. So I actually just knocked the other side out on the driver. We are on the passenger. It was not crazy, but it wasn't the easiest thing. So I just want to run through some steps, and we'll go through how to get this out and get it done correctly and efficiently. So let's get into it now, guys. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to address here is the Phillips screws holding the rotor in. In my opinion, if you can't get these out, then you're not doing the rotor replacement. You're not doing the job. So you might as well go ahead and try to get these out first, because these could potentially be a real pain. So what I did on the other side, I just quickly do some PB in there. Okay, nothing crazy. And what I did is we're going to let it sit for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and get these bolts out. Alright, guys, so after letting that PB soak for a minute, didn't let it sit too long, just kind of got it in there, let it sit for a couple. I'm going to take a torch and just briefly heat them up. Now, you don't have to do this. This is just me being kind of extra, but I do want this to come out. So we got our impact. I'm pressing pretty hard, so we're just gonna go ahead and back them out. Came right out. Perfect. I do have this on the lowest setting for my impact to not put too much pressure on these. So one-handed, decent amount of pressure, right out. All right, so these can be a royal pain if you don't approach them correctly, in my opinion, and I've seen people strip these out and have problems with them, but they're out, guys. So that's our first step, and we're going to move on and get the rest of this on out of here. All right, guys, next move, getting our caliper bolts out. These are 14 mil. Crack them loose with just a 3/8 drive ratchet. They should roll right on out of there. It's actually really clean, which is nice, and we are going to clean them up just a hair more, put some anti-seize on them for the reassembly. But let's go ahead and spin these out. So they're good, got them on out of there. Now, just a little bit of effort, you can slide your caliper right on off. So what we're going to do is, you don't really want this to hang or be in a position where it's going to get damaged, or the brake hose is going to be subjected to any type of strenuous position or anything of that nature. So what you can do is just rest it right over here in between the shock and the e-brake, and it should be good for right now. The pads, you can wait to take them out, or you can pull them out right now. I got the other side out, just pulling at it, but I might just, since it's not as freely moving as the other one, I'm just going to pull them out when we get the bracket off. So our next move is getting the actual caliper bracket off. So let's get into the process to get that out now. Alright, guys, so in order to get our rear caliper bracket off and to get access to the rotor, get this off and get everything out of here, we need to remove this bolt right here and drop this arm, because the actual bolt holding in the caliper bracket is behind this arm mount. So this was a genius design, I'm sure intentionally, to make this not a friendly job, but I managed to get it done on the other side. So I'm gonna run through the steps in order to get this done. Now, there's another video, I'll put a link for it, which actually helped me get the idea of what needed to be done. He just shot this off and was able to push this up and get to the bolt, and somehow managed to get the bolt out. But I wasn't able to get the bolt out, which I've seen other people have struggles with, without getting the shock out of the way, because once this starts getting punched out, the bolt is pretty long. It's going to start coming in contact with the bottom of the shock. So we got to get that out of there in order to get this bolt out for the arm so we can have access to this caliper bracket bolt. So all you got to do is remove the shock bolt first. So once we remove the shock bolt, we can then remove this, because we'll have the shock out of the way and the assembly won't be blocking our bolt from coming out of the arm. So first move is getting the actual shock bolt out. It is a 19 mil, and then we're going to get the arm bolt out, which is another 19 mil. Just a little bit with a mallet to knock it out of the way. You can see it moved off of its path here, so it's not aligned anymore, but that's going to allow this bolt to shoot out. So now that we got the room, we're going to take a punch, just finish this bolt right on out. So we got both of those out, no problem. What I do is I take these and I just round back on so I keep it together with the right bolt right to the side. We're good. So we got our lower shock bolt out, shock was out of the way, we got our arm bolt out, and then what we're going to do now is just knock that right up. So got it. There you go, guys. This is how you get access to that rear caliper bracket bolt. So we knocked the arm loose, we got our shock bolt loose to get the arm out, so all of this is removed in order to get to just one measly bolt that is holding in our caliper brackets. So, alright guys, the next move here is we're going to get these caliper brackets off and get the actual caliper bracket off in its entirety. So I actually got this out with an impact. You don't need an impact, but if you got one, I mean, you might as well use it. It makes life easier. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a regular 12, putting it on the impact. I'm just going to back this thing right on out. One bracket bolt out. Now this other one is not as easily accessible, so I'm just taking a ratchet. It's actually only a 3/8. You don't need nothing crazy. Broke it loose very easy with a 3/8. So like I said, you don't need an impact. It just makes life easier. Why work harder when you can work smarter? So once you crack these loose too, they should just back out with your finger. Like I said, these bolts are actually really clean on here, so it's making the job easy. As you can see, we got it right there. So we got both of our caliper bolts out. We've got both of our bracket bolts out. We got our suspension bolts out. Now this bracket should come right on out. See? Bracket's right off of there. And now we have access to our rotor. Alright guys, so if you didn't get the pads out prior to getting the actual bracket off, like when I took the bracket off, I had both pads still installed. You could just pry one out, with a pry bar. I pried it out with this little end of the hammer, so I pried one side out and just knocked the other side straight out with the hammer just by barely tapping it. So got them pads both out of here. Next move is to actually get the rotor itself off. Now I put the e-brake on when I took the 2 Phillips screws out. just to make sure I had perfect, see, e-brake was engaged, just to make sure I had it perfectly sturdy so I can use impact without the rotor or anything moving. But you want to make sure you take the e-brake off after you do that in order to get this rotor out, because it will prevent you from loosening the rotor. So we're going to go ahead and knock this rotor off, and we should be good from there, guys. Spin treatment. Spin and just hit in between each lug nut. Sometimes you might have to take a torch to it, which I had to do on the other side, but luckily we got that one off without a torch and wasted propane. Alright, so we're good. This is actually, it's pretty clean, but we're going to go ahead. So it's pretty clean, but we're going to go ahead and just hit it with some brake cleaner. And clean all that up. Why not? Alright, we're going to let that dry. What we're going to do now is take our caliper bracket and we're going to go ahead and put this on a rotor, and we're going to clean this off as well. So let me show you guys. Alright guys, you can make yourself a little makeshift table just to clean this off. So I'm just putting it on the rotor, heating it with some brake cleaner. I'll let that dry. Alright, and from here we can start getting into the reassembly, guys. Alright guys, so we got our new pads here, new rotor. One thing to keep in mind is usually when you get new rotors, they have a coating on there to prevent them from rusting, and you always need to brake clean and wipe it off before install. So I brake cleaned it, wiped it down with a paper towel, make sure it's clean, dry, nothing lubricated on there. Don't want anything allowing your brakes to slip with any grease or anything of that nature. So first thing we're going to do before the reassembly is just retract the caliper piston. Now, the easiest way to do this is get yourself a pad separator. It kind of acts like a C-clamp. These are better for rear in my experience with different cars and, you know, smaller calipers. These are easier to do for a rear caliper setup. What I have here is I've put a brake pad, one of the old brake pads, right pressed up against the piston there, as flush as we can get it. And all we're going to do is just turn this and create the pressure to get the pad pressed up against the piston and to retract the piston. So you don't have to go crazy with this. We just want to get this flush. You know, a few nice turns should get this done. So we're going to go ahead and retract the piston now. Just make sure it doesn't get off balance and it's staying even, pressing it in even as possible. Good, guys. So you don't have to go crazy. There we go. It's perfectly flush. That should slide right over our new pads and rotor. So we're going to put that back to the side. We can go ahead and move forward by starting to install our parts. So first thing we're going to do is take our rotor here. You want to line it up perfectly with these holes. So remember, we have the screw holes that need to get aligned, so that not only needs to be aligned but also with the studs. So we need to make sure all this gets aligned. So let's go ahead and get this on here. Alright, so we got the new rotor slid on. I personally just like to put a lug nut on there to press it up against the hub and the rotor just to keep it straight and prevent it from moving, keeping it tight. So got our lug nut on here, prevent it from flexing. Now, the old rotor did have a gasket in there, rubber gasket. I just popped this out with a pick. We're just going to pop it right back into the new rotor. There we go. We got our gasket in there, and as you can see, our screw holes are aligned. So now what we're going to do is get into the reassembly of everything to put this back together and get these bolts back in for the suspension, get the caliper bracket on, and get everything aligned. So let's get into that now. All right guys, so the service manual that I found for this has these bolts rated for 54 pounds of torque for these 12 mil bolts holding on the caliper bracket. I did that, set it to 54 on my torque wrench on the other side. I think it's overshot. I actually stopped before I got a click because it felt as though it was just way too much. So what I would recommend is you can set your torque wrench to 54 pounds and then just do it till you feel it's not gonna take the head of the bolt off. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys. Probably won't get a click here. And you do want to get these tight before you put the rest of it back, because remember, the arm here, the suspension arm, is blocking this. So make sure you tighten this before. Oh, I made a liar out of me. Look at that. That one's perfect, actually. So I must have got it right before it felt like it was too much on the other side. All right, let's do this one. Let's see if this one ends up feeling like it's too much. Well, we got that one torqued to 54 pounds, as it should. Yeah, this one's in there and I don't have a click, so I'm gonna leave that one as is. Just make sure I'm locked in here real quick. Try to get it from one more angle maybe. Double check, but definitely feels like it's good. Yeah, that thing is in there, and you don't want to go too crazy with these and over tighten them. So that's good. We got our bracket back in here. It's all attached now. All right guys, now that we got our caliper bracket installed, our two 12 mils holding it in, torque down, everything's in, the next move we need to make is get our rear arm back aligned, as well as the shock. So both of our suspension components need to be attached before we move forward and put anything else back together. So this is how we disassembled it. We're just doing the opposite of removal, and we're just putting it back how we took it apart. So first thing we're going to do is try to get this arm here aligned. You're probably going to need to get yourself another jack. I have the car jacked up, but I also have another jack to help uncollapse the suspension. So we're going to go ahead and get this jack in position to help align this arm so we can get the bolt back in. So let's get that done now, guys. All right guys, the first thing we're going to do is start jacking this up. Now I will say, probably going to have to knock some things around to get this aligned. Might need a hammer or two, mallet. You're definitely going to need a few things to move the strut and get some play within all of this. So I got it right about connected. I'm going to move the caliper out of the way. Alright, got her banged back down in there. Definitely not aligned though, so what we need to do is get a screwdriver. Start aligning this with the hole. This is way easier said than done. I think I actually need to hit it a little bit more here. Let me try to let some pressure off of her. Alright. So I released a little bit of the tension on the... There we go. There we go. I felt that fall into place. Yeah, there we go. So now, see if we can't move this around a bit. Yep. Okay, guys, so if you see there's a little bit of flex here, you start moving this around. Alright, got that pretty much aligned. Now in the other video I'm going to link, they actually put the bolt in backwards, which probably would be easier, but I like to make everything exactly how it was from the factory, try to make it OE as possible, look like nobody was ever in there. So what I'm going to do, and I got it on the other side, is actually put it back how it came off. Remember, this one has the washer, so we're going to go ahead and just put this in how it came out with the washer and the nut, and we're going to try to get it right through here, guys. Now this may take a few tries. If it's aligned on this side doesn't mean it's aligned on the other. So might have to put the screwdriver in there while forcing the bolt in. I'm going to move the shock out of the way there for a second. That's why you need to disconnect the shock, guys, because I just literally pushed it out of the way so I can get this bolt back in here. Alright, bolt isn't quite going in, so I'm going to have to mess with it here, try to force it in here. If I'm blocking your view, just tell me to move. Alright guys, got to go in a hair. So how I did it is I'm playing with the screwdriver because it does have play. I'm gonna mess with it. Yep, while you're forcing it in, so it starts aligning it. Now what I did is I took this little hammer here, and I started using it as a pry bar on the other side. Try to help pry this thing in. Yep. See, I got some movement there, guys. Alright. So we're coming in there. Getting deeper in the hole there. Alright, she's coming through, guys. Not fun, but doable with a little bit of patience and the right tools. Alright. So that's about as far as I got it on the other side. Now, what we're going to do is try to give it a little hit with the hammer. She is getting it through a little bit more, which is what we want. So, almost pulling on it. Alright guys, that's pretty good. What we're going to do now is you need to get yourself a ratcheting wrench, 19 mil, and we're going to start pushing this through. So once it's through this side, you can start actually getting it through the hole, and you can just lightly do it. I'm barely even moving this wrench. In fact, it almost wants to come back out. It's so loose, which is good. We got that play. Alright. So just want to get it some threads here through. As you can see, we're making some good progress. You can almost help it along here with the other side. There we go, guys. So what I want to do with this, as I did with our other bolts, is anti-seize it. So what I'm going to do is just throw a little bit of anti-seize in the actual nut for the bolt. And then every thread that goes through it will have anti-seize on it. So I've got a nut here. Just going to go ahead and press some anti-seize in. I've got a little bit more than I wanted, but it's all good. I'm going to wipe some of that out of there. There we go. Now remember, set a washer. Washer goes on. Start threading it back in there. And what you can do for the moment is just take your 19 mil and just lightly shoot it back on. So you could have did that with a ratchet, impact, whatever works, but we got it tight. Alright. So now, the torque spec for this is 115 pounds. So we're going to grab our torque wrench. Right over it. There it is, guys. It's torqued in. Alright. Alright guys, so now that we have this torqued in, the arm is reattached, we can proceed to get our strut reattached. So should have your bolt and your nut here. Clean her up. Now we're probably going to have to do a little bit of knocking around to get this strut to come back on alignment, but actually moving pretty good right now. Looks like we just need to come up a hair to get it to fully aligned. I do believe the strut's a bit easier than the arm, so once you just need to bring it down here, I should say. There we go. Yep, you see it falling into place? Oh, there you go, guys. So I just let that drop right with this jack. Literally finagled it with the jack. If you don't have 2 jacks, you're going to need to do 2 jacks, because this is the easiest way you can get things aligned with little to minimum effort. So, and even then, it's still not always the easiest on alignment, but I'm going to have to kind of do what I did with the last one, which is take a screwdriver, finagle it a hair. Okay, locked in here. Okay, I'm gonna bring it up a hair for that side. Try to knock this through with a mallet. There you go, guys. Right back through there. It's actually really not that hard when you got the right tools. I'm gonna go ahead and take this nut as well. Throw some anti-seize in it. This always makes it easier for any disassembly in the future, which hopefully you don't need to do any of this, but just in case, we want to be prepared. So I'm just going to lightly shoot that on, and that is a 19 mil. So we'll lightly shoot that on, guys. Okay, she's on. Now, this is also rated for 115 pounds for torque spec. Let's go ahead and try to get this thing torqued in here. In fact, I want to use an extension because it'll make it a little easier. Guys, got our torque wrench set. Let's go ahead and see where we're at. There it is, guys. Perfect. Locked in. So 115 pounds, 115 pounds. And from here, guys, we can start reassembling the brake system. So we got our suspension now out of the way, which was arguably the hard part. And now we can get back into easy brake stuff. So let's finish this brake assembly off and get this knocked out. All right, guys, so now that our suspension is all torqued on, reattached, we're going to move on to finishing the braking. So when you get power stop brakes or any kits or anything from them, they usually come with some brake component lubricant, which is actually really good and helps prevent squealing and things of that nature. So usually one pack does both brakes, and probably can even get away with doing 4 with a pack. But what we're going to do is go ahead and get some of this brake lubricant on our contact points. So you want to get into the hardware, okay? Everywhere the brake pad touches on the hardware, just get a little bit on your finger. You're just going to press it right in. All right, see, I'm just getting a very little bit, taking it, just pressing it right in, okay? So now, once that's in there, you got everything on your shims all lubricated up, we can put our pads in. Now these just slide in. Should be able to just press them on in. Front one here should be a little bit easier than that rear one's going to be. So got the front one in. Keep in mind the rear one does have the metal wear sensor. So this is where our wear sensor is going to be. Okay, that's where the wear sensor is. So let's go ahead and get this pad in. Okay, actually slid right in there. So we're good, guys. It's in there, shims are good. Okay, so both of our pads are tight on the rotor, everything is assembled. Next move here is going to be greasing up with the lubricant on our pads. Now, what you want to do is get the lubricant on spots where the caliper makes contact. So we'll put a little bit right here, bring it on over to here. This helps prevent squeaking and things of that nature, which can happen when you get new brakes installed. Your brakes are subjected to squeaking at any point, especially when you disassemble and reassemble. All right, this helps keep that down. Now to see, I got a little bit on my finger, we're going to put a circle in the back. There's a circle right dead center on the back where the piston meets the pad. So that piston will be completely lubricated when it touches the pads, okay? So now we've got everything lubricated, pads installed. If you remember, we did retract our piston already, so this is pretty good. Let's hope that it just drops right over, and it should if we retracted it enough. We're going to press in our slides right here, and remember to check them before reassembly. All right, let's go ahead and slide this guy over. Yep, perfect, guys, just enough on the retract. Look at that, perfect, guys. All right, so from here, the only thing we need to do is put in our 14 mil caliper bolts, which hold it to the bracket, and we're almost done, guys. All right, guys, so we're going to do the same thing for these caliper bolts that we did with our other bolts, and we're just going to take a little bit of anti-seize, go ahead and put it around the whole threaded area. All right, start that in there, get it finger tight, flew right in there, perfect. Next one, a little bit on, get it covered on the threads, and then we'll slide this one in on this. Yep, it just flies right in there. All right, so that is both of our 14 mil caliper bolts there. Okay, so all we need to do now is get these tightened in. Now, I couldn't find a torque spec for these. I could be blind. So what I did is I just left my torque wrench at 54 pounds, and I just did it so it felt tight. I mean, you can kind of feel these things out. I do ideally like having torque specs and torquing everything to spec. I think that's your best option if you have that option. There's a reason they, put these bolts to certain pounds, and it gives you the most optimal torque for removal and installation, but they're not always accessible. Sometimes you can't find torque specs for certain bolts, and you kind of got to feel it out. So most people don't torque anyway, but like I said, I think it's a good idea. But we're just going to keep it at 54 and just do these until they feel about tight as they should be. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and try to get these tightened in. So it shouldn't be anything crazy. 14 mil bolt, you can kind of feel it out as if you can hold on to it. All right, that feels good. Let's go and get this one. So you don't need these to be too crazy tight, and if you remember, they broke loose pretty easily, which means they weren't crazy tight to begin with. So there we go, guys, that is on. Everything is reassembled. We have everything torqued. This whole caliper assembly is back on. Brake pads, rotor, suspension, everything back intact. So everything is reassembled. Our last move here, just to complete the entire job, is to get our screws that held the rotor in, the Phillips screws, right back in there. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with all our other bolts. So we're going to get a little bit of anti-seize, okay? Just get a little bit across the threads, all right? Right in. You can get our other one, just the littlest bit, just enough to get your finger to cover all threads, all right? That back in this one. Spin our lug nut off. Make it easier, there we go. Got our start in here. Now, all we're going to do is just shoot these back in very lightly with the impact. I have this impact on the lowest setting. lightly tighten these in there. Just one, perfect. There we go, guys. Both of them are in there clean. Got everything reassembled here. We should be good, guys.